Yeah, I mean, we try to put way too much control on a lot of other things, so that I don't think is appropriate. But if we were going to address it, then we would need to put it in the first paragraph. Letter B is where it would go. You know, each month, the first part of blah, 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 and it talks about how to do it. So that is where we would put it.
Right.
I think we need to have a line in there that talks about the procedure somewhere, because it's already posted on our website. And so, and that's what we're doing. So I think we need to, if we don't want to put it in policy, we need to put it somewhere that says, you know, we can handle that as best that we want. Because it does say, in paragraph 2, the last line, at any time the board may establish additional procedures to ensure that public comment sessions proceed in an efficient and orderly manner. So we probably don't even need to have it in there.
Okay.
But we might want to address that, such as, you know, the lottery, first come, first serve, you know, because that's what we're doing.
Okay. Is there an amendment that you want to make to it?
No.
Okay.
Well, let's see. Yeah, maybe at that line, I would say, at any time the board may establish to ensure public comment, including the use of a lottery sign-up.
Can you repeat it, please?
Where is that?
It's paragraph 2,
Okay.
page 19, paragraph 2, the very last line. At any time, the board may establish additional procedures to ensure that public comment sessions proceed in an efficient and orderly manner. Such as use of a lottery system for sign-up.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I had a note to myself, the 5 lines preceding that. I find it interesting every time I read this. I don't think the public realizes that it says in our policy, if an unusual large number of people request to speak, a majority of the board may decide to request the designation of a spokesperson for each group of persons supporting or opposing the same positions. At any time, the board may establish additional procedures. So I think it's interesting that we don't use that, but it's in here. Again, I just find it interesting every time I read it.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is completely up to the chair.
Right.
The chair has to make that statement and has to go out into the audience and do that. And the chair has never done that as far as, I mean, I tried it one time and, you know, thought I was going to have like darts, you know, thrown through my eyeballs. But yeah, so it's just something that we can do. The chair has to make that call.
So do you want to make an official amendment? I don't know if there was an official. No?
No.
So do we want to add that component, that lottery component, or no?
Well, Ms. Chair, I think Ms. Crable made a motion. I don't know if there was a second yet.
Yeah.
Oh, no one seconded it. Oh, well, I can second it at this point, correct?
Sure.
So I'll second that, to add the verbiage on on policy 2310,
2310, letter A,
no, letter B,
I'm sorry, letter B,
yep, second paragraph,
second paragraph, last line.
Such as.
such as
Such as.
use of a lottery system for sign-up.
Or including but not limited to, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, something, whatever word, you know, makes better sense.
Okay.
Mr. Vogel was turning his head, so he might have
Mr. Vogel, do you have
a
any
word preference
thoughts
of
on that?
such as or including but not limited to.
No, I don't have thoughts.
Okay. All right, so we have a first and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor of the amendment to 2310, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Passes 3-0. The next thing is, I'd like to make a motion to send the amended policy to the board for approval.
Second?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm back to the same thing that I said before.
Okay.
That in letter A, in the blue, where it says prior to the agenda review meeting, which is typically 1 week prior to the regular board meeting. I don't believe that we need to, that typically is not a good policy word. We either do it or we don't. We've defined it in in several other policies on when we have to put things in, 5 business days before. So I don't like the word typically in there, and it just sends us back again to why we need to describe what an agenda review meeting is. I think we need to take out that.
Based off discussion with the board at the last meeting, I know that they, as a body, we decided to send that group of policies back, so that there could be some, the word.
Synergy, cohesiveness.
Synergy, cohesiveness, thank you. I'm going to rescind my motion to send this to the board, just so that we can have all of them. And I'll make a new motion to hold this in policy to discuss with the related policies, just so there's cohesiveness with all of them.
Okay, you're talking about putting it into the grouping with 2300, 2320, and 2335?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Oh, do I need a motion on the rescinding?
No, you can just rescind.
No? Okay, perfect. All right, so the motion is to move this to the next committee meeting to be discussed with the rest of the related policies.
Yeah, as we're doing that, just,
Well, is there a second
Oh, I'm
first?
sorry, oh, yes,
Did you second?
yeah.
Okay, now we can.
I just wanted to, what I had sent you this morning and what Ms. Godetsky printed out for us, I think that as we're looking through all 4 of those, I just wanted us to keep in mind the North Carolina Open Government Guide, where it says, that, issues can be addressed through, on page 31, any issue can be addressed through a special meeting, but the public cannot take up matters at a special meeting. But we cannot take up matters at a special meeting that were not ID'd in the notice. So we're not allowed to vote on things that weren't there. And it says, does the public have the right to see written materials? And on page 4, it talks to us about that once the document is created for us, it is a matter of public record. So when we're talking about holding things back from the public, from before, when we get it, and I was looking at like one of, Ms. Bradford's, quotes was
Madam Chair?
Ma'am,
No, all right, I just want to say.
This is not germane to what we're doing
It
today.
is. It is germane, please. Is that, why would the public get information prior to us? If they wanted to have the information early, then they should run for public office. So our job is to.
Madam Chair.
I'm done. I'm done with that point of order.
we're going to move on with this.
I know. So what I'm saying is that we.
Well, Madam
But
Chair, I
ma'am,
object
we
to
need
this
to move
discussion.
on with this.
All right, go ahead.
So we're going to vote on keeping this in committee so that we can discuss it with the other things. The information that Ms. Crable shared will definitely help us with all of the policies as it pertains to this. So the motion was seconded. All in favor of holding this in committee until next month, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 3-0. Moving on, we have 3470 and 4305. I brought this to our attorney because we had some confusion within the board, and I just wanted to make sure that there was clear communication and clear policy set up, and so I asked him to help me parse out that last section on page 27. So I'm going to make a motion to move this on to the board for approval.
I will second.
And
hold for
discussion. Discussion. We have a second, so discussion. Ms. Crable?
Yes, so that answered one of my questions is who did the proposing of the termination, and specifically in letter H3. I just want clarification from the district that the Career Readiness Academy at Mosley is not an alternative learning school.
It's not.
Huh?
No, it's not.
Right, so that is where I think that if you must put the termination in there, that is fine. But I just want to make sure that we are all clear when we are talking about this, that Mosley does not fall into this category. So if we think that we're doing something to put that terminology in there, we are not doing what we think we're doing.
Can I address it? Our two alternative sites are right next door and J.C. Rowe. Those are the only two alternative programs that we have.
So that's what, so I guess I'm just wondering, why did we feel the need to do that? I mean, what is your concern?
Well, like I said, I believe there was confusion about the role, and I wanted to provide that clarification for future board members to have that.
Okay, so let me ask this question if I may. It says 3 termination, and then the wording under there, the board will have sole authority to terminate an alternative learning program of a school.
Or school.
Or school, sorry. Are we thinking that this means of other schools as well? Because it doesn't say that.
This is, if it's in this policy, it refers to these schools.
Okay, so it refers just to those 2 schools.
For
Yes.
this policy, yes.
Is there another policy that is coming?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may clarify, I'd looked at this previously on behalf of the board, and I'm looking at it right now at the DPI website, and they consider Career Readiness Academy at Mosley PLC to be an alternative learning school.
No, they don't. That's not true.
I'm just saying what I'm looking at.
But I'm saying that's not true. That, I'm not sure. What's the copyright date on that one?
I'm sorry?
What's the date that's on that? We have documentation from the
It says
embassy.
updated October 22nd, 2023.
It's not true.
Do
We have to give,
do we have that updated documentation that we can
well, the
provide?
testing and accountability
Okay.
shows that we give the exact same test that we give for all schools. That's why we moved from that. I think that was 21, maybe, somewhere around there, 21, when the state changed it. And there is documentation where we had to sign off to put them into the normal testing. They take the same accountability measures as the others, and you can look at that online. So if you go and look at how they are assessed, for instance, they take the same EOCs that every other school. They take, there's no EOGs there, but the EOCs and the absenteeism, the graduation, that accountability measures falls as the same. We can definitely have or Dr. Murray provide that information, but I know that information to be solid because it falls, honestly, if you go back and look where they're in one of our schools that is low performing. And so that means that it's not alternative, it's under the
So do
regular.
we need to provide that updated information to the DPI? Because it's
No,
on
they
the-
provided it to us.
It's on the DPI
But it's on the
website.
DPI
What I'm
website,
saying
correct?
is that they have
Yes.
paperwork that they sent to
They-
us.
but- so they haven't
that-
updated.
Yeah, that's wrong. The board has the information.
Okay. All right, so there was a motion to send this on to the board and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 3-0. And that is... And the next policy is 4351, right? Yes. 4351. In gathering information, I asked for legal, implications of all of this. I've looked at some of the data and added the proposed language of students under age 8 or under grade 3 have a right to have a parent or other representative present at the informal hearing. They have a right. It is not necessarily implying that. Actually, that's a discussion piece. So I'm going to move that we move this on to the board for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Yes, Ms. Craig?
Okay, so wondering if you had any guidance from from Ms. Barnum and her department on this wording.
No, I spoke with the attorney.
So this is the attorney's words, not.
The attorney's words and in discussion.
Okay. So I would like to ask a question, if I may, of Ms. May. So, first of all, the words that were taken out, over in the deleted, they should be left in and struck out so that we can see where they are. That's one of those things that is just really hard to follow. I went back and looked at the old policy.
As did I.
So that needs to be there. But my question is, how would this affect you, Ms. May, and other of your principal colleagues at the schools if we were to do this?
It would be very, very difficult. Not all of our parents have phone numbers at work. So that's one thing that was the first thing that I thought of, is how many times we've tried to get in touch with parents to have conversations about attendance or even a positive phone call, but we don't have any way of getting in touch with them because we don't have a phone number that works. Another concern I have is with students that are bilingual or parents that are non-English speaking parents. I don't have anybody at my school who could stop what they're doing and come and interpret. So to have a parent, that would be a really, really challenging situation. The other thing is, when we're dealing with any kind of disciplinary situation, and it doesn't matter whether the child is in kindergarten or 5th grade, and I'm assuming probably in middle school and high school, we are having an informal conversation as part of the investigation process. And so if that would be considered a hearing, then that would essentially be saying that we can't talk to any children without their parent being present. So like, if there's a situation that happens between two kids on the playground, just to kind of sort through whatever the situation is, we have to talk to the children. And that's part of their due process rights for us to talk to them, but that would be considered the informal hearing. Like, I can tell in a conversation with the two kids what the situation is, and then I'm gonna make my decision based on that conversation. It's not an interrogation, it's just trying to, figure out the facts as best we can from small children. Yeah, I mean, that would be very, very difficult for us to follow that all the time. I mean, just because we have challenges with getting in touch with parents.
I'm going to have Ms. Bradford, and then I'll come to you.
May I ask Principal May a question? We have heard from a lot of advocates in the community that say that this policy would only affect about 13 children in the entire school district. And so I'm trying to marry two appearing to be opposite opinions. It's very challenging for me. The school district says, we can't do this. It'd just be too prohibitive. But they're saying to us, it's be only a tiny number of children that we're talking about. So how do I resolve that?
So I think just like we would do in our school, if there's, I've got 515 kids in my school, if there's something that only pertains to the 13, I'm only going to, I'm not going to put something in place for all 515 if there's only 13, right? And in the district, if it's the whole district.
I don't think that, I may have misspoken, that there's
13
of the
students.
number of children that are being suspended.
Only 13 of them are K2.
Yeah.
Right. So
Okay.
I think I would deal with that on a case-by-case, individual basis, school by school.
I have a couple questions. I'm not sure why we're using the word informal hearing. I don't think that's appropriate for what we are doing, because when we have a hearing, we're doing a level of suspension, which I think that can be confusing. So I think we should not use informal hearing, because when we go to a hearing, there's an actual process that Student Services uses for hearing. In addition, I'm not sure where that number of 13 comes from. That would be a violation if any person shared that they are using any type of disciplinary action and that it's 13. I would really want to know where that number came from, because that's inappropriate for anyone to know how many kids are being or whatever. I think, how do you resolve it? You have to trust the people who are sitting at the head of those schools. A lot of people are going to say things. We had some information that was sent to us, and we talked about safe schools. But if you're saying that every situation a parent has got to sit there before it's dealt with, that is, I'm going to just be honest with you. I don't understand the reason why. Where is it wrong? Where's the system broken? And I think that's where you employ the senior staff to go and investigate to see what's broken so that we bring things back. I've never known it to be where we're on the defense of what we're doing what's right for kids. And that's what actually happens every time. We're having to be on the defensive side of, this is what they're doing, this is not what Principal Mays is doing. Principal Mays is not doing that. This is not what the principal at the school is doing. But it appears to put the school district in defense when we create policies and not actually even speak to any of the principals. I would recommend you come to the next principals meeting. We have elementary breakout sessions, and you can sit down and you can speak with them in how it works and what does an actual due process look like, because all you're doing is a due process, and I shouldn't have to have a parent there to ask a question or to write. We don't do it at any time. So I think we're putting policies or attempting to put policies in place, and we've not even asked the experts who sit at the head of their buildings.
Yes.
My hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Then perhaps we should table this until we can have a meeting with the principals and so on, because for at least the last 2 years, we've had community members like the one sitting in front of us now who say, this is what's going on, and we've never fully responded to them and addressed every single one of their things coming from this, one of their points coming from the school district. And I tried to attempt that last meeting, and it didn't really work, and so we ended up in policy. So I would say, I would make a motion that we hold this, and we do talk to superintendents, and we do get to the bottom
Principals.
of what's being said.
Principals,
What is it?
superintendents.
Oh, I did, principals. And that we get to the bottom of this so that every single meeting we have, we don't have to have this presented with no answers. I would think that if I had a 4-year-old in the school district, that I would want to be called if my child was down in the office and was being questioned by adults. I can't divorce myself from that emotion as a parent, grandparent, and great-grandparent. But I want to get to the bottom of this, and I've taken in zero information other than what's been emailed all board. I have not met with anyone. I have not been prejudiced by anyone. So just go back and read your board emails if you want to see what people are saying. We get hundreds of emails about it. We get copious amounts of comments about it, and I want to get to the bottom of it. So I move that we postpone this until we can have discussions and find out. I mean, I do not disagree with you at all. I respect your opinion, but at the same time, I need to get to the bottom of where the truth really is.
Ms. Frida?
So I would like to, I'm fine with doing that. I just want to call attention to the fact that Ms. Barnum puts relevant information in our board packet every week. And most recently, she addressed it, that they had audited the narratives of the behavior incidents and found that we were just coding things differently. So before we start getting to the bottom of things, I think we need to trust the report that we're getting from our senior leadership, which, and we can go back, you look at the last one, and she keeps hers on a running thing. So we can go back and look for a whole year on what's going on. So I think it's unfair for us to, as we're trying to get to the bottom of anything, not to take into account the professional leadership and the data that is being presented to us from the district's point of view, the district's leader point of view, and maybe not spun. And I do also have the same concerns that Dr. Faust has, is that if people in the community know more than we know about cases, there's a serious problem of people telling things about students. And again, we're back into a personnel issue
Ms.
and a
Farley,
FERPA.
would you be able to speak briefly about some of the miscoding or the, not miscoding, but the coding differences?
Sure.
So they're not miscoded,
I
and
misspoke.
I don't have the memo pulled up, but I'm going to
You're
go
good.
from memory. So as Ms. May is speaking about suspensions, for example, we have had situations where we have K-2 out-of-school suspensions that the narrative describes either a weapon or assault. We don't have any records of I don't recall a record of drugs. So, for example, assault, and the narrative will describe that, but the code used by the principal might be aggressive behavior. But in looking at the narrative, you see that the student either assaulted a fellow student leading to injury, or assaulted the teacher, or in one case, had their hands wrapped around the principal's neck. And so what we do is we're not just looking at what it's coded to be, because the code is a drop down and you pick the one. And I'm having these conversations with principals too about if you're suspending for behavior that is assault, you need to code as assault. And many times it's, I don't want to create the harshest code. I want a lesser code because they hate to put that in the student record, but they need some level of short-term suspension for the nature of the behavior. So in our audit, we did not find that principals are violating school board policy, and that's what I explained in the memo, and I've also explained that to our community partners in face-to-face meetings.
Ms. Mason? Can I note something parliamentary-wise? We haven't had a second on
Correct.
Ms. Bradford's motion, which I take as a motion to postpone to an indefinite time.
I was going to do, the next thing I was going to do was vote on the original motion and then move from there. So the original motion was to move this to the board
Well,
for
I think
approval.
what-
And then we have to vote on that, correct? And then I was going to go with her.
I think
you
her
moved back.
her motion supersedes.
Yeah, hers
She
does.
has a motion
Okay.
to postpone
Okay.
indefinitely, and there hasn't been a second. And once you have a second, I'd like to make if I may, clarify some things. May I? Or you want a second
Well,
first?
do we have a second to postpone or to move this to the, you said the next policy meeting? Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. As a matter of clarification, Ms. May mentioned that she thought that this language would apply in the investigation phase, let's call it, like when there's a scuffle, let's say at recess, I think you said. I don't believe the language reads that way. Rather, it's just at the informal hearing stage. In other words, there's already been an investigation, and now it's time for the administrator to decide whether to suspend the student, and before the administrator has that informal hearing, the parent are notified, the parents are given an opportunity to participate under this proposed language. So I don't read the language to apply to the, I'll call it the investigation phase of trying to figure out the facts.
But that's what Ms. Bradford wants, right? What you want is you want a parent to be present for when,
there's a scuffle,
no, for when we talk to children.
I would, personally, and if I had to vote today, I probably would vote that way. If the child is grade 3 or lower, before you suspend that child, I don't want the parent there. That's what I would feel as a parent, as a grandparent, and a great-grandparent.
So as part of the.
And I don't have enough information to vote today.
Right.
But if I'm forced into it, that's how I would
But
vote.
as part of the investigation, or as part of the
The suspension.
suspension?
Okay, because I'm
'Cause
reading.
they're separate.
Yeah, and it may be that we need to put in another something right through here, and pre-suspension rights of the students, because this blue language right now says has a right to have a parent or other representative present at the informal hearing, and then it says at the hearing, student and parent or other representative, if applicable, shall be informed of the charges and the base of the accusations against them. So maybe we need to separate that out a little bit and make the language a little bit more clear, so that you know exactly what our intent is as a board.
I mean, it doesn't change anything for me, like it.
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, whether parents have to be there for the investigation part when we're speaking to their child, or for when we say, this is what's happened, so your child's going to have this consequence. If we can't get in touch with parents, or we don't have the way to communicate with parents, then the feasibility is equally as low.
You can't. So basically what she's saying, this all happens in one, it's not days.
Yeah,
It's,
this happens.
if it happens, altercation happens at 10:40. The principal or administrator gets students, here's a document, I need you to give your side story, teacher has written up something, I'm looking at that, I'm giving it to who are your witnesses. It may take an hour, 2 hours. So what you're saying is that I can't talk to the student who was hurt or the student who hurt the other one because there's not a parent there. It all happens in one swing. No, but what I'm saying, it happens all in one swing. There's not, I'm going to take a day and I'm going to interview this one and then I'm going to come back the next day and it's all within hours. And sometimes it does take the entire day to do the entire investigation. If you have multiple sources of information, you're collecting that information. And sometimes it is at the end of the day when you make that decision to say, this is what the board policy states and this is what I'm following, and I'm contacting mom and dad on the telephone, and I'm attempting to get in touch with them to let them know that the child has in-school suspension, the child has, a 2-day out-of-school suspension, but it's all in one day. It's not multiple meetings.
I mean, I might, while I'm talking to the student, I might say, all right, well, whatever the case may be, this is what's going to be your consequence. I'm not going to stop that meeting. Okay, we're done talking. Now I've got to go call your parent to see if they can come here so that I can continue the rest of my sentence. And that's essentially what that would require.
Right.
And this is, the school level investigation is broken down in a different policy. In policy 4340, school level investigations, it is step by step broken down. And the term hearing is referring to where the part one, the principal investigates the facts and circumstances related to the alleged misbehavior, and then including all the information. Number two, offer the student an opportunity to be heard on the matter and raise any defense the student thinks relevant. So we need to look at that policy if we're looking at 4340.
Okay.
Well, I would like to say something briefly. I think that the intent behind this was so that there would be consistency across the schools. I understand that we need to trust our staff and our administration for sure. We also need to make sure that because there are different standards that people have, and there's some objectivity and subjectivity that we have to consider. Additionally, I don't believe it says it's a requirement for a parent to be present. I believe that it says that the parent, it does say present. But it doesn't say required, it's a right. So the efforts that are made is how I read it.
So what would change in what we do now?
Previously, the policy said they don't have the right to have a parent or other representative present, so that changes the word.
So oftentimes when you call the parent will say, I want to come up. And you're just like, sure, I will meet with you. So the parent has the right at that time too. I think what's happening is what we are trained on as administrators is different than what non-folks see it. And so you do offer all of those insights, and there's, again, I think it puts the school district on defense because we're having to defend. And again, I'm not sure of what principal isn't using the protocol to do due process, because basically all you're doing is due process. I just don't know, and I think, again, I do believe policy board members need to just talk to principals, because I think the entire situation needs to be understood. I don't think the board understands what happens, and that's not an insult. I'm saying that there is a policy in place and a protocol in place, and the only subjectivity that comes in is what's in the board policy that says I can give you 0 to 10 days. And so I may choose 1 day, or I may not choose any days, and someone may choose 10 days. That's where the subjectivity comes in, and it gives, but the board gives the administrator the wherewithal to make that decision, because there's a level of trust of you make the decision that this is the standard that we're going to follow. That they all have to do due process. They cannot do, you can't bring to J.C. Rose. We don't have the document which leads up to that if it goes back to the school. So there are layers that I don't think all of you know that go into place. So I think you should literally just have a discussion with elementary principals, and I mean, we have breakout sessions where it can be elementary, middle, and high, and how it works. So I think that'd be a great conversation for the board to have.
Ms. Bradford?
And that was part of my follow-up. And if we don't have time to do this today, but I would like to understand the layers, because when Dr. Faust was talking earlier, he said, you know, at 10:40 there's an incident, and then 1 or 2 hours later. And I'm thinking, I have a 5 or 6-year-old sitting there for hours in
No.
distress. You know, this is like scar you for life stuff.
No,
Okay.
no.
So I would like to see, give me a typical, this happens at this time, you know, we suspend at that time, or we decide not to suspend. Walk me through what it looks like.
I mean,
Depends.
it really does depend. Like, we try to handle disciplinary matters as soon as possible. I would never have a kid just sitting in my office. That doesn't make any kind of sense, and we don't have a babysitting service in our office, right? Everybody has a job that they're trying to do. So until we can get to the student and the disciplinary situation, they have to be in a classroom learning, right? And then when we can, you know, I mean, my assistant principal may not be available, I may not be available, but when one of us is available, then we'll go through Educator's Handbook and kind of triage, like, what's the most important thing that we've got to get to first. So if there's a major incident, we're going to go to that first, and we'll handle that whole situation. Sometimes it might take 2 hours. Sometimes it might take 10 minutes. It just depends. And as soon as we handle the situation, then we're on the phone calling the parent, and then we're on to the next situation. But there isn't any time, at least in my building, where there's a child sitting for hours on end in queue waiting to be dealt with. That's just not the way it happens. And I would find it hard to believe that any school has a queue system like that.
Would you have a child in, question them, and then send them back to class, and then a couple hours later, there might be more discussion?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if I have a student that I'm asking them, like, I'm asking them about something that happened, and then I send them back to class, and then another student comes and talks to me, and I find out something different, then I might send that student back, and then the first student comes back. I mean, it's, you know, and it doesn't really matter whether they're K2. When we're talking with children, we're talking to children. So I mean. And if you've never had a conversation or tried to investigate something with little kids, I mean, the stories can be way not even close to the truth. So, you know, that's kind of what we're trying to tease out, is what parts of this are fact and what parts of this are embellishments, or, you know, like, how do we figure out, like, what actually happened here from all of the different sides. And sometimes that takes time, and sometimes it doesn't take any time.
So thank you for that explanation, and thank you, Dr. Faust, for the offer to invite us to the principals meeting. Can all three of us come to that and listen in at the same time without violating any open
We
meeting?
we would set up a time where you could come, and one could be with elementary, one could be with middle, I know you're looking at one where
Yeah.
you could all circulate, because we have the breakout session. When's our next principals meeting? And those are closed meetings.
Right, that's what I was saying, I didn't want to,
But
April meeting.
I believe that we all three could come, as long as we're listening, as long as we're there to learn.
But we
and
could
we're not
actually-
deliberating on board business. I know you and I disagree on this, and we always will, but I'm going with what the law says.
But we could have it where you could ask questions and you're in different rooms. at different
I don't
times.
think that's necessary.
But I would definitely need you to ask questions for it.
Well, April the 11th is our principals meeting, and we do the level meetings in the afternoon. So we will schedule a time for board members to come in and have time to talk with the different levels. I think that's what Dr. Faust is saying. That way you are getting the perspective from the middle school, the elementary, and the high school. So
I think all we're talking about today here is grade 3 and under, so I'd like to focus on that.
okay.
But I really want you to hear how it works,
How it works,
because
total.
it's not, you're going to hear issues. Of course, yes, the focus will be elementary. You can all talk about elementary, but I think you need to understand the process honestly doesn't change. The conversation changes because of the differentiation in how you interview a 5-year-old or preschooler versus how you may interview a senior.
Yeah, the level of maturity of the student just changes radically as you go up past 3rd grade. And
I think it would
that's-
also give you
that's the
some
concern.
knowledge. It would give you guys more insight.
Right.
You know, I mean, I know we're just talking about elementary, but if you're going to be there, actually, to have that insight from the different levels, I think would really help you as you do your job on the board, and would really allow you to advocate, communicate better. So just something that we would definitely offer up for you guys to be able to
If
talk
I'm
to
going
all
to be there,
3
I just
levels.
want to be there for the whole thing and use it as a learning experience for the whole thing.
Okay, all right.
I have another question.
Yes, Ms. Cruz.
So, I think from what I've heard is we're having a little bit of disconnect on the words informal hearing
And I have that.
versus just conversation investigation. So I think that as we're listening to the principals, we need to think about those 2 words. And also, as I'm looking through here, it says children age 8 or under grade 3. So under grade 3 does not mean grade 3. It means 2nd, 1st, kindergarten
Okay, so
with that. So I think we need to clarify those points too, as we're coming back. I mean, this isn't for today, this is for us as we're listening,
Ms. Bradford?
if that's what we want to go with.
And I agree. I'd like to go back to something we were talking about a few minutes ago with Ms. Barnum, coding. Because I've heard at the call to audience that so many students were suspended for, just whatever. And yet we have policy that it's drugs or alcohol, assaults, threats, weapons, bomb threats, terrorist threats, or clear threats to safety. So for this last year, the ones where the coding was more minor than what the read-up said happened, you mentioned something about a choking. Can you go back and recode those? Or at least say, we had 12 of these, and looking at them, I mean, I know you gave us a report just the other day, but I want to put it out to the public because there's so much discussion on this. And the fact that I was very concerned that we had policy that said only these things, and yet we're seeing children on the paperwork that says they were, suspended for, talking back.
Yeah.
So
so-
can we correct this?
Yes, for current year, absolutely, and that's information that principals have been getting. So make sure you're coding accurately toward what the policy says. Now, that doesn't mean that they violated policy, but it makes the data reporting match, and then you don't have to necessarily dig through the audits to determine that it is compliant. So that's been direction that principals have been receiving. But like I said, I did have a face-to-face meeting and explained our auditing process, and then we've continued the same auditing process into this school year. So that was communicated to our advocacy group, but certainly want to be able to communicate that at the will of the board, however you think that's going to be most helpful.
And in the updated, well, I won't say the updated, in the latest memo that we sent was, the board received this on Friday, policy 4351, data on K-2 out-of-school suspension and auditing narratives of the behavior incidents were reviewed of any K-2 out-of-school suspension that was not coded for assault, weapon, or drugs. In auditing the incidents, the narratives describe the reasons for the suspensions as assault. Therefore, the suspensions are appropriately assigned and are not a violation of policy. This was communicated in person to the leaders of the advocacy group, claiming principals have violated policy. Principals have been directed to ensure the assault code accompanies any assignment of out-of-school suspension for assault instead of using a lower-level code. We sent this to the board on Friday.
Right, so if there is no further discussion, the motion was to hold 4351 in policy. Let's vote on it. All in favor? Did you have anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note that we should be looking at policy 4340 in conjunction
Yes.
with 4351. So I think we need to
Let
just,
me amend that we pull 4340 in, if it's my
Yeah, I
motion that
think-
we're amending, because I don't even know where we are.
I know it's been a bit.
Are we on an amendment, or are we on the, what are we doing?
You've got the motion to postpone until the next policy committee meeting.
Okay, and then I say that let's drag 4340 into this and add it to the agenda as well.
Well, the chair can put that on the agenda
Right.
at the next meeting.
Okay.
It's the chair's prerogative.
I would recommend you also look at 4341, which is parental involvement in student behavior issues. All those could go hand in hand.
Okay. All right, so the motion is to postpone, leave this in policy, 4351, leave in policy until the next policy meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. That passes 2-1.
who voted no?
Myself. And the last policy for today, since we took 5210 off, is policy 5020. I believe, Ms. Farnham, was this one the one that you brought forward, you and Ms. Souza?
Yes, this is a conversation that we've been having for some time, and Mr. Vogel weighed in and provided some language on this. So I don't know if you want me to...
Oh, I'm sorry, you were looking at me? I was looking
No,
down.
I wasn't. But I don't know if you want me to describe kind of the situation, or if Mr. Vogel wants to jump in, however we want to do that.
I will defer to you. Do you want to introduce the issue, and then
Sure.
I'll jump in?
Sure. So, as we've discussed, and as Ms. May has kind of laid out in at least one form, it's really busy in the schools, and it's really difficult to accomplish everything that has to be accomplished with all board policies, and especially with regard to curriculum instruction, which is the reason we all come together every day. So we often have requests for visitors in our schools and school facilities. And of course, this policy lays out our interest in having community and parent involvement and supporting schools in the educational program, opportunities to visit the schools. It goes into requirements of visitors, and then further conduct standards. But then, and then if it perhaps gets to the point of unauthorized, disruptive, dangerous, we have processes for that to maintain safety. And it has been recommended by the Department of Public Instruction to have another section of this policy regarding private service providers requesting to come into the school. So this would not necessarily be, or this would be completely separate from services that the school provides as a part of the educational institution. So we provide school counseling services, we provide school social work, we provide school-based mental health, we provide special education and all the related services, such as speech language, occupational therapy, physical therapy. But this is if a parent is utilizing other services out in the community, whether they are medical services, whether they are another type of private clinical service that's outside the scope of the schools. We often get requests for those services to be provided to their child at the school during the school day. And our position is we need every minute of the school day to carry out the instructional requirements in policy, and specifically in the 3000 series. And so this section is added to prevent the schools from becoming a site of all services, but protection of the services we're obligated to provide. So we, again, private service providers, and it might It's not that we're in disagreement that those students might need those services. It's just it's not a part of the educational plan. It's outside of our scope, because any service that is determined that the student requires it to access their instruction, it's our responsibility to provide that. So if a student requires speech therapy services to access their special education and general education, we provide that. But we need, again, every minute of the day to provide the services that we're obligated to provide.
And I guess my question is, do we have ABA therapists within the school?
So our teachers that come through their teacher ed program have ABA training. So, and we have contracted with ABA providers, specifically board certified behavior analysts, and then applied behavior analysts that can support programming as needed.
So, did I hear you correctly that this section, F, came from DPI? Or this came from you guys?
So it came from us, so I asked Mr.
Okay.
Vogel to create wording around this, but it was recommended that boards add this to policy regarding visitors so that we can protect the integrity of the instructional program and limit interruptions so we can carry on.
How often do we have private service providers trying to bring their service provider into the schools now?
It's not an uncommon request. So I don't know that I can give you a number, but over the years, I've been doing this a long time, over the years it's been pretty common. We have had our stance that we have to protect the instructional day, but we're seeing an increase in those requests.
So how would that work? Let's say my child, I wanted them to have speech therapy, different from what you were doing. I would ask, in the past, I would have asked, can they come in and, at 10 to 11? And then what would happen, what was scheduled from 10 to 11? It just get knocked out?
Well, we would have difficulty, we can't rearrange the master schedule for those situations. And we would say, well, no, we're having required instruction during that time. So we can't release a child during parts. We don't have gaps in the school day where we're looking for things for kids to be busied by. We are masterfully scheduling, and an elementary principal can tell you, masterfully scheduling every minute and 2 minutes on what type of activities we can push in to make sure we meet our obligations. Again, it's all about meeting the obligations of the 3,000 series of education programs.
And would this, if a parent feels perhaps that, because I see it says supplemental, would it be because we provide speech therapy, we provide occupational therapy, we provide physical therapy, correct?
Yes.
All of those things. If a parent wanted additional outside of the realm of the IEP, that is also included in here for like outside providers.
So if
Like they
want-
couldn't come into the school is what I'm saying.
Right. If they want outside providers or more than the educational program, we're saying that needs to be done outside of the school day
Okay.
and not involve the school setting. We have safety factors. We want to make sure that we can verify everybody coming in that has access in the school building. We also want to make sure that we've got the full time of the student to complete their educational program. So our suggestion is, if you want more and beyond the educational program, absolutely, please schedule it after school hours.
Yes, Ms. Brinkley.
Can I ask you, see, I'm making you a superintendent. Superintendent May, her opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It's very disruptive. I have had this year, and I contacted Julie to make sure that I could say no, because it's very disruptive to the student's day. And then the other thing is space. If somebody's coming into my building and they want to provide some other type of therapy, and in this case it was mental health services, I have to provide them with a private space, and I don't have an extra space. And I would rather have that happen after school so that our kids are having access to literacy and math instruction during the day.
Ms. Brinkley, did you have anything more to? Ms. Redford?
I move that we move policy 5220 onto the full board without
50/20? You said 52/20?
Yeah.
That's okay.
scrambled map today.
And I will second that. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 3-0.
All right. I move that we adjourn.
All right, we have,
Can we, before we move to adjourn, can you just go over the list to make sure
Yes.
that we're all the
so
same?
policies that are being held are policy 5210, policy 2310, and policy 4351. Policies going to the board are policy 3470/4305 and policy 5020. Does that line up with what everybody else has? All right, so I will second your motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time.